The state of Rhode Island has the best Chinese food I've ever eaten. If you actually know the right places to go to. And there's about 5 locations off the top of my mind that I could think of. But the restaurant that I'm actually going to be highlighting in today's video with these images is from a place in Cranston on Atwood Avenue called China Dynasty. They have some of the best Chinese food in the whole state. And it's actually considered a Cantonese style. So now let's look at their fried rice. Seeing how it's not yellow and loaded with chopped vegetables like peas and carrots and all that. Theirs has got like a brown tint to it. It is absolutely delicious. It's got bean sprouts in it and chopped sauteed onion. You put a little bit of soy sauce on this stuff and it is so good. Now sitting next to the rice is what they're really noted for. Their glazed chicken wings. We don't see just plain fried chicken wings like we see in many states. These are packed with flavor. They're kind of on the sweet side, but they also have a savory, awesome flavor. Now where I live now is in North Carolina in the South, and I cannot find Chinese food this close. And I really, really miss it. And one thing is beef teriyaki. Their beef teriyaki is out of this world. A lot of the menus locally to me doesn't even have beef teriyaki listed on their menu. And then of course the star of the show for today's video is their Chinese ribs. It's got that nice reddish glaze to them. They are delicious Chinese ribs. Put a little bit of duck sauce on them, you're in heaven. Now, seeing where I live now, they don't have a clue when it comes to making half this food. I'll be truthfully honest with you. The food is very bland. It doesn't have any flavor. So I'm pretty much forced to make my own Chinese food. Hello, folks, and welcome to the OceanState Cuisine. But before we get started, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Ring that bell for more notifications of awesome, delicious videos coming your way, and give us a like. In today's video, I'm going to show you guys how I make my Chinese-style Cantonese ribs on the bone. So now let's take a look at the ingredients I'm going to be using for today's recipe. If I did leave something out, we will see it as we continue through the video. So in the front, I have my ribs. These are kind of like a baby back rib, but they're a little bit larger. And yes, you do want to stick with pork ribs when it comes to making Chinese spare ribs on the bone. The ribs that Chinese restaurants get, I don't know where they get them from. I've tried looking for them in supermarkets and I just could not find them. Theirs don't have tons of meat on them like the ribs that we're used to in the state. And then next to that, I have a cup of some brown sugar to the left. And then next to the brown sugar, I got some ground ginger. Behind that, I got some cooking rice wine. Next to the rice wine, we have some rice vinegar. Now the teriyaki sauce next to that. Teriyaki sauce is something you really got to be careful, because a lot of it is not that good. And how you can usually tell is that teriyaki sauce should be kind of thick. It should be almost as thick as like pancake syrup. And it should not be thin like soy sauce. So how you can tell is when you go shopping for this, get the bottle and tip it. And you'll be able to see how thin it is or how thick. Now Kikkoman also makes a teriyaki sauce that's on the thin side, and I think it's terrible. It's salty. It's pretty much like eating soy sauce, where teriyaki sauce should be on the sweet side. This blend by them, I heard, is supposed to be one of the best on the market. So it is. It's really, really good. And then next to that, we're going to be using some minced garlic. And then the bottle above the minced garlic, I know we can't see it too well, that's Chinese 5-spice. Chinese 5-spice is used in a lot of Chinese cooking. And then next to that, we got some soy sauce. And then next to the soy sauce, we got some onion powder. And then in front of that, we got some red food coloring. And again, if I did leave something out, we'll cover it in the video. Now we need to cut up our spare ribs. Now if you want to leave them as a whole rack, you can. The reason why I'm doing this, and I'm having a tough time with this one right here because it's got a crossbone, is because I'm going to marinate mine overnight in the solution I'm going to make in a food storage bag. And it's going to fit better in the bag by cutting these up. So easy peasy, and we're ready to move on. And if you did notice, I did tip them over. It's easier that way. You could see the ribs. You could see the space in between each bone a lot easier. Now next, it's time to make our solution. So I'm going to start off with some brown sugar. And I'm probably using, I'd say, about 1/4 cup here. Maybe a little more, maybe a 1/2 cup or so. Again, it depends on how many ribs you're making. I'm not making too many because it's just me eating these. So I'm just going to add all that, or most of it. And then I'm going to add some warm tap water to this. And it's going to help it dissolve, where it's going to blend in better with the other ingredients. As we see right here. Just give it a nice stir, and you're good to go. Now, a little bit about the sauce. The sauce, I'm going to kind of make it on the thin side. I want it to really penetrate the meat. And now in goes some teriyaki sauce. This is going to add some great flavors. And again, try to get a good teriyaki sauce. We could see that this even has nice spices and stuff floating around in it. Now in goes some soy sauce. And again, you want to add a good amount, but yet not too much because you don't want it to be too salty. And then in goes the rice wine. This adds great flavor to Chinese ribs. And then next, a couple of splashes of the rice wine vinegar. And now for our minced garlic, and I do add quite a bit. Judge this on your taste. But to me, ribs definitely need garlic. And then next I'm going to add some onion powder to this. Onion powder gives it a wonderful flavor. Now in goes some ground ginger. Ground ginger is excellent in Chinese dishes. But now if you have the actual ginger root, you could slice that up into little slices and then put that right into the marinade, and the flavors will definitely get into the spare ribs. And now I just added the Chinese 5 spice, and with this I just added a couple of sprinkles. Some people will rub all the ribs down with this, like a dry rub, but it can sometimes be a little bit too strong, so you gotta be careful with it. Now when something looks good, it usually tastes good. So, good Chinese spare ribs usually has that red tint to the color of them. So, for that, I'm going to use some food coloring, red food coloring. A piece of advice, if you use food coloring and you get it on your skin or on your countertops, wash it off as soon as possible, because once that stuff dries, it's really tough to remove. Now I'm also tasting a little bit of this on my finger just to see how it is, and it tastes really good. Now after giving this all a good stir, That's it pretty much for the sauce. Now it's time to marinate. And again, I'm going to use double food storage bags here to marinate them overnight. You could also marinate them for a couple of hours. And the double bag's going to ensure that it doesn't leak, because we don't want that food coloring getting all over the place. So now all we have to do is place the ribs inside the bag, and then we're just going to pour the sauce on top of it. And again, my sauce is very thin. It's not thick like a Texas barbecue sauce. The reason for this is because Chinese ribs don't have a thick glaze on them. And when the sauce is thin, it penetrates the meat better, so it actually gets into the center of the rib. So as we could see, I even added a little more water to this to thin it out a bit. Now we're just going to give it a good stir, and we're going to now pour it on top of the ribs inside the bag. You want to squeeze out all the excess air, just like I'm doing here. Twist the bag tight so it doesn't leak. And then I tuck it on over to the bottom with the weight of the bag holding it in place. And then for added security, in case if it did leak, I'm actually going to store it inside of a shallow bowl. Now if you've watched any of my past videos when I marinate foods, what I tend to do is I get the bag, and while it's marinating, a couple of times or maybe halfway through the marinating time, I like to flip it over to ensure that it coats all the food. Now with the magic of editing, we are now on the next day. I am now going to remove the ribs and let them sit out for a while to room temperature. I'm going to spray my bacon dish here with some cooking spray. And now what we want to do is we want to preheat our oven now to 300 Fahrenheit. Again, that's 300 Fahrenheit. And now we are going to simply place these upside down in the bottom of the bacon dish. The reason for this is because that's where most of the meat is, so we want that to soak in the marinade. And again, for the actual Chinese ribs that they use in the restaurants, they don't really have any meat on the top of their ribs. It's mainly just on the sides. Now the next thing I'm going to do now is get the remaining marinade from the bag, and we're going to pour it right over these ribs, right into the bacon dish. Now next, I'm going to cover this as tight as I possibly can with some aluminum foil. Now I know it's difficult with the bacon dish that I'm using for the aluminum foil to actually wrap around something, but if you're using a metal bacon pan, you've got the handles on the side and usually a rim. And then in the oven it goes, and I cook these on 300 degrees Fahrenheit for about 2 hours. So now here they are after 2 hours baking. And what we want to do now is turn the oven up to about 350 to about 375. And we also want to pour off now the excess marinade. Now before we move on, I want to touch on a few key details. When I make a dish like this, I'm trying to get as close as I can as a copycat to the restaurants that I remembered where I love Chinese style ribs. So, I'm trying to get a rib that's not falling off the bone tender like we're used to in the States when it comes to making like barbecue Texas style ribs. And then B, they're not a rib that's really wet. They don't have a thick sauce on them. They're actually on the dry side. So what most people would do is put a little bit of duck sauce on them while they're eating their ribs. Now my ribs did come out a little more tender than I was actually hoping for, but the overall final result was terrific. The taste was almost pretty much spot on. Now when I said earlier about the second bake where we're going to put them back in between 350 and 375, you could even go up to 400. It depends on how fast you want these to finish off. I cooked mine on 360 for about 15 to 20 minutes. We're just looking for that added color and to dry them out a bit. Keep in mind also that whenever you cook something that's got sugars in it, which this does, they tend to burn fast. So you want to keep an eye on that to make sure that you don't overcook them. Now, what we're looking at here is that I got my ribs on top of a strip of aluminum foil that I folded over and made it kind of on the thick side. This is the same aluminum foil piece that I used to cover the dish with before I baked the ribs. What this helps with is that it's not going to make them tip over and all that while you're baking them the second time. So it's going to pretty much hold them up in place, because we all know that ribs have that curve to it because of the bone. And there we are, folks, the finished product. Cantonese, Chinese style, spare ribs on the bone. Boy, do they look good. I got a secret for you. Wait till you taste them. So there you have it, guys, and I thank you so much for stopping by and checking out the OceanState Cuisine. And again, remember to hit that sub button for more awesome recipes coming your way. Ring that bell for more notifications. And as always, comment down below, because as always, we love to hear from you. And until the next time, you guys have yourself a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.